The Old Testament is kind of a difficult book to read, partly because it spans several thousand years of history, and it's history we don't quite understand. The Middle East has always, even today, been a complexity that we really don't grasp all of the nuances of it. Nor do we really understand the political, religious, social ways in which these stories were written to create a story of a people. And that's not strange or different or odd. We in the United States, in Great Britain, and France, we all have a story of origin, if you will, how our country began. And so this too is part of what's embedded in the Old Testament, but it makes it very difficult for us to understand and really grasp. And their story today I wanted to tell you about was about the prophet Ezekiel. Now, Ezekiel's found kind of halfway into the Old Testament, and he lived during a historical time when the Jews had been taken captive to Babylon around 585 BCE, which means before Jesus was born. It had a profound impact on people because they felt that the land God had given them, now where did God go when they weren't in that land anymore? The first temple had been destroyed. That was where God's presence lived among them. So where is God now? So the people are here in this foreign land, and they're struggling with their faith and their understanding of God and who and what they are. And so Ezekiel, like all of the prophets, had a vision. God came to Ezekiel in a vision, and God showed him a valley of dry bones. It's an interesting imagery because it's not just one or two bones, it's a valley of bones. If you think about, you see these pictures of like the desert, and there's this one lone head of a cattle, and it's all bleached out and white, but a whole valley of bones is what God is trying to show him, how the people have gone away. All of the people have gone away from him. It wasn't just one or two, it was everybody. But God says to Ezekiel in that dream not to worry, because if the people returned back to God, and he wasn't necessarily referring to the land, he was referring to their heart, he made them this promise. He said, "A new heart I will give you, a new spirit I will put within you, and I will remove the stone that had once been your heart." Now, let's talk about this image of the dry bones. I found it to be extremely fascinating. And the reason so is that we as a society, I'm talking globally now, don't really use the Old Testament much as a reference point for things that are happening in the world, partly because we don't understand it, partly because we don't get the history or the biblical reference that's going on. So you don't see it much. And it was curious to me that within probably 2 months, I saw reference to the Valley of the Dry Bones or the dry bones in probably six different writings, some spiritual, some not, that I normally read on a weekly, daily basis. And I thought, this image has got to be speaking to us as people right here, right now, because it is so out there and being talked about so often. Now, I want it to be clear that I'm not talking about externals, okay? Although they do impact us, certainly they do. But what I'm talking about are, let me call them our spiritual bones. Our spirit feels, and I'm speaking for myself definitely, like it's kind of eroding. The bombardment of everything that's going on. Do you realize just maybe 200 years ago, even 100 years ago, news traveled so slow that something would change and it wouldn't change again for 50 years? But no, for us today, it changes every 50 minutes. That has a profound effect on our psyches, on our bodies. It's like Oh no, here comes some more news. Oh my goodness, here's something else that's happening. We're beginning to see, and we've seen it growing over time, that we're losing our moral moorings. What is right? What is wrong? What is truth? We're also losing our connection to church. And I don't necessarily mean any church, but to the seasons and cycles of the liturgical rhythm that happens within the context of the church. So, what's happening is this bleached bone feeling is that we feel powerless in a lot of ways. We feel like, oh, I just can't watch one more. Don't you get that feeling? I get that feeling a lot of times, like, just don't tell me about it. I can't handle anymore. As a result, see, this is the shall we call it the tragedy of it? Is we begin to shut down. We can't handle anymore. I don't know if you have ever had an experience of an autistic being with an autistic child. We used to have one many, many years ago in Sunday school, and she was about 6. And that was my first experience with a truly autistic child. And her mother came up and said to me, she said, Marianne, you know, all this noise, and there wasn't really any noise per se, but the other kids talking and the music and stuff. She said she can't handle it. She has to shut down. So when you talk to her, she keys on your voice and she doesn't hear anything else and she doesn't see anyone else. And I thought, wow, that whole world that we take in, the 180 view of the world, what we hear, what we see, what we experience, is narrowed into this very focused vision because they cannot absorb all that information coming in and how they struggle. Well, that's given me an appreciation, if you will, of how we today are so bombarded with the news. I mean, let's face it, whatever happened to Walter Cronkite? That's all I needed. One CBS nightly news, and I was done. I had the news for the rest of the week. But that's not what we have anymore. We have the news, and then we have the evaluation of the news, and then we have the critique of the news. Or we're experiencing a health challenge, or we're caregivers to people, and all of the, I was recently with my dad, and all of the decisions we as the family had to make for him and have him make for himself was like, what are they talking about? I don't even know anymore. And so what happens is, as we close down, the unintended consequence is our heart becomes hard. Oh, my. If that isn't one thing we've heard across the breadth of the Old Testament, the people have hardened their hearts. And now I understand a little bit more what that phrase really means. As I try to somehow contain all that's coming at me faster than I can absorb, I begin to physically, emotionally close down. But the side effect of that, or the other side of it, is that my heart is closed down to the cries of people, to the hurt in humanity, to my own inner confusion and frustration. Today is Easter Sunday. Lent was the period of spiritual preparation before we came into Easter. It's a time of release, a time of letting go, so that we can be in a whole different space to be able to witness the resurrection and new life. But we struggle with the resurrection story, and unfortunately, that's very sad because we struggle with it in the sense that we tend to believe, because we were taught to believe, that it happened to one man, one time, one long ago, and never again. So it's all about Easter Sunday, this one moment, this one day, this one time. And we fail to be able to step back and say, Easter Sunday is my Easter, is my resurrection. It is my story. Because as long as we keep it out here, Then tomorrow morning we wake up and go, well, that's over with, moving right along. And I go back to the same way of living. And my bones get drier and drier and drier. But maybe this Easter, we need to challenge ourselves to something different. Now, if we look at scripture, we see that all four gospels end with the resurrection story. However, they end, it doesn't matter. They all end there. Boop, closed. And then you see the Acts of the Apostles. The story picks up again with now Jesus has ascended to heaven, and the disciples are left standing there going, wonder what that was all about. I mean, really, there was no way they could have comprehended what had happened, not only to him, and this is the critical point, but to them. You see, they believed in what he said. They tried to emulate him. He was their leader. They looked up to him. Of course they did. They wanted to do what he had challenged them to do, to be better people, for a term here. And it's interesting that according to the book of Acts, it took 50 days for them to figure it out. We kind of skip over that part. See, Lent was 40 days, and what we call the after Easter was 50 days till Pentecost. And what happened at Pentecost when they embraced and awakened to all of those teachings that were in their head? Now they were living them out in their life. Those dead bones that they saw in that end time of Good Friday and Saturday, and this experience that they didn't understand about Sunday, now becomes their living reality. And it's the same promise. God promised a new heart, and God promised a new spirit, and God promised to roll away the stone from their heart. So this morning, I'm sitting in meditation, kind of going over my sermon, and like we all do. And I had this image came up. It was a very powerful image. I was sitting in a very, very dark, like cave. And suddenly the whatever was blocking my view, let's call it a stone, moved just slightly so that I couldn't really see outside, nor could I really tell what was going on out there. But it was like a sliver of light. And I thought, what a profound image. Our struggle with resurrection is because we look at the Jesus story and it happened all at once, overnight. But the reality is we get a little tiny sliver of light into our valley of dry, dry bones. And I thought to myself, what do I name that light? Do I name it strength? Do I name it love? Do I name it hope? Do I name it peace? And that the challenge is for the next 50 days to watch that slim piece of light become the new dawn in my life. Now, let's think of this in terms of, when does sunrise, when does light really begin? If you're ever out early in the morning, like 4 or 5 o'clock, you recognize that there's a progression to the moment of sunrise. It happens nautical twilight, blue hour. You ever been up at blue hour when everything seems, wow, everything's really blue. Then there's golden hour. The sun is coming up higher to the horizon and suddenly it's sunrise. And at night, it's the reverse. The sun sets, we have golden hour, we have blue hour, and we have nautical twilight. It happens the same thing every single day. It's not like, today we turn the lights on. And isn't it true of the spring? Here in the Northern Hemisphere, are we not experiencing that same shifting of the light? There's more and more. And we were eating dinner, or I sat down to eat dinner last night. I thought, oh my gosh, it's 6:30. That's late for us. We usually eat around 6, but it was light. We were busy. We were out. We were doing. And I didn't see the passing of time because just 3 months ago, 7 o'clock would have been dark, but now it's not. And so I thought to myself, this is what the valley of dry bones that I think we're all feeling at this point in time for various reasons. Spiritual dryness, that it's not going to magically go away and everything's fine. Rather, it's a slim thread of light. We're looking in the darkness. If you've ever been in a cave, you're looking, your eyes, you can feel them straining to see that light because we are programmed to look for the light, to live toward the light always. You see, God is a God of connection and communion. God hasn't backed away from us, said, well, I'm tired of y'all. I'm going to do something else. No, that's not the way it works. It's we who have, in our humanness, in our daily, have gotten to the place of saying, I'll get around to praying tomorrow. I'll get around to that. I'm going to do a little more meditation, read the daily word, whatever. But we let it slide. That's why Easter comes once a year. It's the remembrance. It's the time to say, okay, the dead bones can rise again. Our spiritual passion and power can rise again. We are not distant from God. Or rephrase, God is not distant from us. We feel distant from God. I want to read to you a poem. It's a very short poem from one of my favorite authors, Joyce Rupp. It's called The Dry Bones. Tiredness grounds me into a quiet stupor of the spirit. Don't you get that? I do. I yearn to be inspired, to be lifted up, set free beyond this place of deadness. The struggle goes on, however, and you and I, God, we exist together with seemingly little communion. Yet in the deepest part of me, I believe in you, perhaps more strongly than ever. I am learning you as a God of silence, of darkness, of deep and strong. I do not wrestle anymore, only wait for you to bring my dry bones into dancing once again. On this Easter Sunday morning, let's first and foremost begin to accept the fact that this story is my story. It isn't just about Jesus. It's about me living into the resurrection of my dry bones. It's that sense that I understand and forgive my humanness and accept those teachings of God, those promises, those beliefs, that as what the image for me that came up was that I want to stand in that light and I want to hold my hand on my heart and breathe into feeling it being renewed. I want to feel it being softened. I want to feel my spirit being re-energized. And maybe today it's just a slim, slim line of light. Maybe tomorrow it's a little bit more and a little bit more. The feeling of being once again reconnected to life and to love, and to slowly but surely feel that resurrected life, not as something that happens magically overnight, but it takes its time, it unfolds within us, but it renews us completely. Thank you and God bless.